last year, UCLA faculty were able to raise $1.6 billion with a B in research funding. That's a record number for us. All of this will translate into cutting-edge research, and with the help of the village we have assembled here today, that will turn into products that will improve and save lives. One of our missions in TDG is to build a life science ecosystem at West LA around our campus. And I'm so excited to see that this conference that we have grown in the last 4 years became a keystone element of our thriving community. One of the things that we do at TDG is file patents. We identify innovation on campus with our faculty, and we give it the legal protection and packaging of a patent. And I'm often asked by faculty and students, why are patents needed? Why do we need to create this legal monopoly? And our keynote speaker, Andrei Iancu, will explain why does IP save patients' lives. It gives me great honor to introduce Andrei. Andrei was the Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and the Director of the USPTO. He was confirmed unanimously by Senate in February of 2018. Prior to his service at government, Andrei taught a patent law course at UCLA and was managing partner at Irell Manella, a local law firm. Most importantly, Andrei is my new boss and chairman of the Technology Development Group Board of Directors. Andrei, please.
Thank you so much, Amir, for that very kind introduction, and so great to be here with all of you. TDG really has been doing a tremendous job, and I am so honored to be affiliated with it. Of course, anytime UCLA calls, I answer. I've done all my degrees here at UCLA. As Amir mentioned, I taught a course here at the law school for a number of years, and I'm always really so excited to be here on campus, and every experience coming here on campus, beginning with parking, of course, is always special. So good to hear from the prior speakers as well, and especially Chancellor Block, who has such a tremendous role and has played such an important leadership role in promoting TDG and innovation on the UCLA campus. All right, well, LABEST, what a great name. I mean, in government, by the way, I think government has a special division that is aimed at coming up with acronyms. And if you look at the bills they put out from Congress, you'll see these weird names that somehow match the substance of the bill, and they come up with these acronyms somewhere in the basement of Capitol Hill, and I don't know, LABEST is really cool. I don't know how they came up with that. But I should say that maybe it should be America's best, because this really is a gathering of some of our country's best minds that are hard at work to secure a better future for all. To anyone who may doubt it, what's on display here today, as I'm sure you'll see throughout the day, proves that the state of the biotech development in the United States is stronger than ever. This, of course, did not happen by coincidence. It is the result of decades of research and development, investment and innovation. And as the former Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property, please allow me this conceit. I do not believe that this level of innovation would have been possible without our intellectual property system. Let me put things in perspective. Human civilization has existed for thousands and thousands of years. Greeks, Romans, Hebrews, ancient China, Egypt, the Mali Empire, Aztecs, Mayans, and countless other societies across time and across the globe. And despite the millennia of human existence, just a couple of hundred years ago, we would have arrived here probably on foot or on horseback or by boat just like they were doing thousands of years ago. And just a couple of hundred years ago, we would be having this meeting by candlelight, just like they were doing thousands of years ago. If we had to send a message across town, and I see most of you sending messages on your phones right now, if we had to send a message across town, our best bet was Paul Revere on horseback or carrier pigeon. And just a couple of hundred years ago, if we needed anesthesia for surgery, our best bet was still just a shot of whiskey. Despite the millennia of human existence, the state of the human condition just 200 years ago was about the same as in ancient Greece. You know, it took 2 weeks to get news of the Declaration of Independence from Philadelphia to Virginia in 1776. Just as long as it took Alexander the Great to get news of the Battle of Arbela to his capital in Macedonia in 331 BC. The tremendous progress we take for granted today has mostly been made over the past 200 years. So what happened 200 years ago? Did humans grow an extra brain? Did their genes change all of a sudden? Obviously, there were lots of changes. But for our purposes, I firmly believe that the inflection point was the American Constitution, which, among many other things, institutionalized the freedom of invention for the first time in human history. The Constitution specifically gave Congress the power to create laws that, quote, promote the progress of science and useful arts by giving to inventors the exclusive right to their inventions. This is the Constitution's Intellectual Property Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8. By the way, this is the only time the word right is mentioned in the body of the Constitution, amendments aside. Think about that. The Constitution of the United States mentioned the word right only once. And it's not individual rights, it's not your land rights, it's intellectual property rights. It was that important to our founders. Anyone could now invent. No need to be friends with the crown anymore. No need to be wealthy or have big manufacturing sites. No need to have funds of your own. The United States created for the first time a free market innovation economy that builds on itself and grows at exponential rates. The results have been just remarkable. Just look at the presenters here today. The pace of technological progress in the modern era far exceeds all such progress in all of the millennia of human existence combined. Our innovation economy has given rise to a spark of ingenuity and development, the magnitude of which humanity has simply never before known. The examples are replete. Take, for instance, Dr. Marvin Carruthers, whose lab-to-market innovations have led to remarkable job creation and progress for our nation and the world. While in the biochemistry doctoral program at Northwestern University in the 1960s, he and his colleagues began the cumbersome and highly specialized work of synthesizing DNA, a process that held little interest for other leading biologists and biochemists at the time. Carruthers recalls people at conferences telling him that he should do something, quote, more interesting with his career. Ignoring the traditional voices, as many inventors often do, he continued his efforts on transforming DNA synthesis from a highly specialized methodology into a widely used research, diagnostic, and forensic tool. He also collaborated at the time significantly with Leroy Hood and others at Caltech. Then one day in 1980, Dr. Carruthers was invited to join some venture capitalists to form a new biotech company. At the time, there were only a handful of such startups in the United States. Carruthers agreed, and soon the group had assembled the foundations to start a company in Thousand Oaks, California, just over the hill from where we are here right now. They called it Applied Molecular Genetics. Now known as Amgen, it is one of the largest independent biotechnology firms in the world, the employer of some 24,000 people. Its market cap is approximately $135 billion with total revenues of over $25 billion a year. And knowing that Amgen is here today and an LABEST sponsor, I hope I got those numbers right. Rashna will tell me later. But here's the key. Because Carruthers' discoveries had the protections of patents behind them, companies and venture capitalists were willing to put money behind his ideas from the start. Carruthers told me directly that without the protection of patents, quote, in his words, quote, I don't think we would have had a really serious biotechnology business, because you have to have patents to protect your technology in order to attract investors to lay down millions of dollars to start a company. They want to know that what you're bringing to the table is worth their investment, close quote. This is a key. He is right. This is a key ingredient needed to get innovations and life-saving technologies from lab to market. Indeed, the importance of patent protection to all new technologies cannot be overstated. And for the startup folks here in the room, listen to this. Approval of a startup's first patent application increases its employment growth over the next 5 years by a remarkable 36% on average. And the increase in sales growth is even higher. And that's just the first patent application being approved. By the way, for his contributions to science and indeed to the entire world, I had the honor, while I was the director of the USPTO, to induct Dr. Carruthers into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2018. Dr. Carruthers exemplifies the brilliance of university-based invention, working together with our venture capital system to change the world. A true lab-to-market success story. And he is obviously not alone. Every day, new inventors and entrepreneurs work diligently to follow in the footsteps of Dr. Carruthers and to develop new technologies, bring them to market, and make a difference to countless people in the United States and around the world. Take a more recent example, UCLA's own Dr. Lily Yang, who is Associate Professor of Microbiology, Immunology, and Molecular Genetics. Dr. Yang focuses on cancer immunotherapy, and more specifically, allogeneic iNKT cell therapy. She and her lab were awarded over $14 million in CIRM grant funding. And then in 2020, Dr. Yang founded Appia Bio, a Los Angeles-based biotech new company. Appia Bio was incubated here at UCLA's Magnify Incubator, part of the California Nanosystems Institute, CNSI, who's here today. And it recently transitioned to the Alexandria real estate site in Culver City. The new company has an exclusive license to UCLA's IP arising from Dr. Yang's lab, and in 2021, Appia Bio, in the middle of the pandemic, raised $52 million in a Series A, and also secured $875 million, $875 million collaboration agreement with Kite from whom we also heard just minutes ago. I really can't wait to see what Dr. Yang and Appia Bio do next. The possible technologies that can emerge from their work can be transformative. And the professor spotlights throughout the day will show there are so many other inspiring stories on display. The brilliance of LA-based inventors and entrepreneurs knows no bounds. But in order for their inventions to translate from the lab to market, these inventors need the private sector. And they need it now more than ever. The United States spends approximately $150 billion in taxpayer dollars for research and development every year. About half of that goes to universities. And despite all this investment, less than 2% of startups come from university-based innovation. Specifically, out of the tens of thousands of startups a year in the United States, only about 1,000 startups come from the university space. And this number represents an almost tripling in the past 2 decades. Bottom line, there's a huge opportunity to commercialize university-based research and innovation. We must seize it. The benefits are clear. Again, listen to this statistic. Survival rates, funds raised, and the rate of successful exits are all higher among university-based technology startups than the rest of them. In our free market system, though, this requires collaboration with the private sector. And the private sector, in turn, needs a reliable intellectual property system to ensure that their investment and resulting innovation will not be appropriated if successful. Take, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic, a glorious success story for intellectual property. Multiple vaccines, not one, were developed within months, not years, since the discovery of the new virus. This didn't happen by coincidence. This is because scientists and engineers had been working on related technologies for years before the pandemic, and billions of dollars had already been invested. During all of those years, the inventors and investors relied on the promise that their patents, trade secrets, and other IP would be protected. This enabled huge investment over the years to allow our scientists to create platforms that could be quickly adopted to respond with remarkable speed when needed. What if all those years there were no IP protections? Would the inventors and investors have behaved the same? Would they have devoted as many resources? By the way, once developed, these vaccines and other COVID-19 technologies have been shared and transferred under hundreds of voluntary collaboration agreements the world over. Don't listen to the rhetoric out there. The fact is that collaboration in the industry for COVID-19 has been unprecedented. This includes the voluntary transfer of technology between small and large companies. Take BioNTech and Pfizer, for example. Large companies, traditional competitors directly head-to-head with each other, collaborating. J&J and Merck, for example. Both domestic, but also internationally. AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute of India, for example, under which agreement the Serum Institute of India will be the second, and India, as a result, will be the second producer of vaccines the world over, only behind the United States. As they were making these deals to share their know-how voluntarily, all these companies were relying on intellectual property laws, trusting that their technology would not be misappropriated, and trusting that the rule of law would be protected if it were. What if there were no IP protections during the past few years of this pandemic? would companies have been willing to transfer their technology at the same rate? Indeed, would a single transfer have taken place? The real answer is that there is no evidence that technology could be created and transferred at these rates without IP. And yet, some argue that we must waive IP rights in order to give access to these life-saving technologies. The motivations are understandable. Vaccine distribution, for example, has not been equal among countries in the world. And too many people in too many countries have not yet had meaningful access to these important technologies. While in some countries the vaccination rates are approaching 100%, in other countries it is not even 10% yet. But is IP the reason for this? And what is the evidence for it? And what would happen if we waive IP? And what is the evidence for that? The reality is that our innovation ecosystem has worked remarkably well to create these life-saving technologies in record time. Governments now need to work together to get them to patients. Industry has done its job. Governments now need to do theirs. Example measures include relaxing export controls, help with logistics, transportation, refrigeration, and help with education and developing public trust. Governments also need to work together to develop long-term plans for capacity building and local manufacturing so that nations can develop self-sufficiency to combat the next health crisis. Let's focus on these real solutions to ensure more equitable access to medicines among the countries of the world. Stop it with mere rhetoric. Bashing IP, the very system that enabled these remarkable technologies in the first place, will not get a single additional shot into a single additional patient anywhere in the world. At the very minimum, there is no evidence that it would. To the contrary, a reliable IP system is part of the solution. It has been since the founding of this great nation. But for it to work at its maximum potential, our system needs to be accessible to all. So with that in mind, let me turn now and leave you with this final thought. Despite all the evidence on the importance of IP, the system remains overly concentrated, demographically, geographically, and economically. For us to continue to prosper as a nation, this must change. For example, women account for more than half of our national workforce. And yet, recent studies from the US Patent and Trademark Office show that only about 13% of inventors named on US patents are women. And other studies show that the numbers for racial minorities are even lower. By the way, innovation from universities is no different. Innovation is also concentrated geographically. 90%, 90, of the nation's employment growth in the innovation sector in the last 15 years was generated in just 5 major coastal cities. By the way, LA is not one of those 5. All in, vast swaths of the American population have been left out of the innovation economy. This is tragic, and for so many reasons. Among other things, workers in IP-intensive industries make an average salary that is almost 50% higher than in other industries. By the way, venture capital is similarly concentrated. In 2021, $330 billion in venture capital was deployed, and only 2% of that number went to companies founded only by women. Another 16% went to founding teams with both men and women. In contrast, 82% in venture capital just last year went to companies founded only by men. All of this must change, period. Expanding participation in the innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem is one of our nation's best and most tangible opportunities for enhancing economic growth and improving the standard of living and quality of life for every American. So I say, let's go do that. But how? This is obviously easier said than done. In my view, though, a key starting point is to have a specific plan. First, identify the specific places along an inventor's or entrepreneur's life where we lose potential inventors, such as at grade school, college, employment, or access to capital. 2, identify the specific solutions for each of the specific places where we lose potential inventors. We lose children in middle school, for example, when they begin to think that math is not cool. There needs to be a solution for that. We lose people at the university level who in various communities don't have access to mentors and role models that they can look up to in their own image. That's a different problem than the elementary school problem. We need to have a solution for that. We lose people at the hiring level in companies. And once in companies, we lose them even though they're in the seats, they do not participate equally. We need to find specific solutions to that, and that problem is different and requires a different solution as well. And we lose people when they go seek venture capital. And that is a different problem still that requires a different solution. But let's be specific about the problems that we have, where they occur along an inventor's life, and what are the specific proposed solutions. And number 3, set specific metrics against which we can hold ourselves accountable. Do not be afraid of metrics. Sure, we might come up short sometimes, but that's okay. We learn from that, and we can adjust, and we can adapt, and come up with different solutions. The last point, the specific metrics, is especially important. You measure what you care about, and you care about what you measure. Speeches and good intentions are no longer enough. Too much is at stake. Our history, including the recent pandemic, as I've mentioned, have proven that IP is too important to innovation, especially to life-saving innovation, the likes of which are being showcased here today. So we need a plan, and we need to be held accountable against that plan. America cannot continue to leave the vast majority of its population out of the IP ecosystem and out of the innovation economy. We need all hands on deck. The good news is that if we unleash the potential of all of our inventors, our best days are yet to come. Recent studies show that by harnessing the creative talent of all Americans, we can quadruple the number of inventors. Quadruple. So let's get to work. I can't wait to hear and learn from all of you in what promises to be a remarkable day here today. You know, an aging Albert Einstein at the very end of his life said to one of his friends, quote, "People like you and me never grow old because we never cease to stand like curious children before the great mystery into which we are born." I really hope that you will join me to feel the same way as we walk the halls of this conference here today. It really is such an honor to be with all of you today, part of this incredibly exciting celebration of innovation and entrepreneurship. Thank you all.